VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today here on VCY America, where we have a dual topic to discuss with our guest. One is in the area of race and what is billed today as racism, and we'll be giving you a biblical perspective on this topic, but also we'll be addressing the matter of media bias. We've just come through an election in which media bias has been front and center, and sadly it's not limited to just election time, but it's running rampant all throughout the year, hence the term fake news that has come about. But, ladies and gentlemen, the media bias that we are seeing today is not just targeted against political figures. It's also targeting Christian organizations, namely the Answers in Genesis ministry. Well, here to discuss these issues with us, we welcome back Ken Ham, the CEO and founder of Answers in Genesis, the highly acclaimed Creation Museum, the world-renowned Ark Encounter. Ken's a speaker in the Daily Answers with Ken Ham program, author of numerous books, including one we'll be discussing today, One Blood for Kids. Ken, welcome back to Crosstalk.
Hey, it's great to be with you again.
Ken, again, the media is targeting Ark Encounter. Just last Friday, Cincinnati Enquirer ran the story with this headline: admissions declined sharply at Ark Encounter. What's happening, Ken? Are you folding up shop? Are you selling lumber from the Ark to make furniture? What's going on?
Actually, right now we've been looking for more seasonal staff to help us. It's so busy. It's interesting. In the first year, when the Ark opened, of course, people come from all over the world and come from all across America. Then in the second year, our numbers were actually greater than the first year. And in our third year, this particular article that was printed in our local newspaper, the Cincinnati Enquirer, is an article that was previously printed about a month ago in the Lexington Herald, which is another secular newspaper in Kentucky. And the headline, admissions declined sharply at Ark Encounter, that was 2 months into our third year, so we still had 10 months to go for our third year. Which is ridiculous. You don't even know what the third year attendance is going to be. But,
right.
They do this because there's an atheist in Kentucky who hates us and hates the Ark. And, the Williamstown, where the Ark is located, imposed a fee on us. They call it a safety fee to get money for their police and fire and so on. But anyway, it's 50 cents a ticket. And so we pay that each month. And they then use that, this atheist uses that to calculate how many tickets were sold and therefore how many people came to the Ark. But you actually can't use that for a projection of how many people came. It's an order of magnitude, but it's way off because, for instance, there's 100,000 children at least that are not counted in that because we have children under 5 free. Disney charges for children 2 and up. Mm-hmm. And so they're not counted. We have thousands of members who have lifetime passes who can use a number of passes a year, free passes a year they get with their membership for others. There's annual passes. We have 7-day passes, all sorts of different things. So that, it's again, they just take a little bit of information, twist it, and it's all with a view to trying to undermine what we're doing. And it's just so typical of the secular media and the atheists today. They hate anything conservative, anything Christian, and they'll do what they can to put a really bad, incorrect twist on it just for the sake of thinking that can malign us. But actually, it gives us more publicity anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing now that they would have contacted you to get your side of the story and to comment on what they call the declining numbers. Tell us about that media encounter you had with them, or was it not there?
Yeah, it's encounters of the non-existent kind.
Mm-hmm.
So the interesting thing is, here's another aspect to it, because here's, again, what these atheists do and what the secular media has done. The Ark is located at exit 154 on Interstate 75 in northern Kentucky, and that's where Williamstown is located. Williamstown is about 2-3 miles from the Ark. It's a little country town, and there are no hotels to speak of, no major hotels. at that interchange, or restaurants. There's, one Mexican restaurant. In Williamstown itself, there's really no hotels or major restaurants or anything. But if you go 3 miles north to Dry Ridge, there are many hotels. They're building new hotels, restaurants. They've been building new restaurants because many people who visit the Ark stay there, visit there. The restaurants that are there become very busy, and all the way up to Cincinnati. There's actually so much demand for rooms that Northern Kentucky has 4 times the national average demand for room rate for hotels, and they're building more hotels because they can't accommodate all the people who want to come because of the Ark and the Creation Museum. And actually, the Ark and the Creation Museum have made Northern Kentucky, they call it the biggest faith-based tourist destination in America now. So the impact economically has been incredible on Northern Kentucky and south, from Cincinnati all the way through to Louisville, Lexington. But Williamstown has had very little impact because there's no infrastructure there. There's no major hotels, no major restaurants. And so they say, oh, look, the Ark is not impacting, not having any economic impact, it's not doing anything, and Williamstown hasn't had any impact. Well, the impact is all south and north. A major impact. In fact, you ask any of the hotels in the Northern Kentucky area or the restaurants, and they'll say they're just slammed because of all the visitors coming to the Ark.
And Ken, let me say this. I mean, we have organized at VCY multiple bus trips, full bus trips to Ark Encounter and Creation Museum. And that's one of the challenges that our group guide has encountered is being able to secure hotel rooms to accommodate the buses coming down.
Well, if anything, that actually does stop people coming, and it restricts people coming. That's why we need a lot more hotel rooms. I think they calculated we need a minimum of 1,400 up to 2,000 more hotel rooms in this area. So there's a hotel boom in this area. But it's interesting how you've got this boom because in the area because 91% of people who come to the Ark and the Creation Museum are outside Kentucky. You have this incredible demand for hotel rooms. Northern Kentucky is now the biggest faith-based tourist destination in America, 4 times the national average demand rate for hotel rooms, restaurants being slammed, and the secular media and the atheists are trying to say, oh, the Ark is sinking. I mean, it's so typical. I mean, I see it happening in politics. I see it with any conservative Christian group. The secular media is so biased against anything Christian, anything conservative. They try to do what they can to malign it and undermine it.
Well, and Ken, I'm sure that when the Northern Kentucky Convention Visitors Bureau or the Chamber of Commerce read this article, they didn't wring their hands. I mean, they know what's happening to the area.
Oh, of course they know what happens in the area, and they're very, very supportive. The Northern Kentucky Convention Visitors Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce, they're extremely supportive of what we do, and they promote Northern Kentucky, and they see it as a tremendous boon to tourism here. In fact, I was the other night, we took some of our board members down for a cruise on the Ohio River with B&B riverboats, and they told us their business has doubled because of the Ark, and it used to be that they'd get the majority of people at lunchtime for their cruises. Now they get the majority at evening because once they've been to the Ark or Museum, a lot of them bust down there, and they're building a whole big new reception center there on the river because of that, and they said it's because of the Ark and the Creation Museum. And many, many other businesses and other facilities have said the same sort of thing. And so I think it's exciting that an evangelistic Christian organization with the 2 leading Christian-themed attractions in the world is actually impacting the community in this way because, you know what, they sit up and they take notice, and we're bringing all these people in, many Christians, many non-Christians, but bringing many Christians in too who impact the area. And to see, when they see Christians doing something like this, they're actually, they listen to us and they want to be our friends, which is really great.
It really is. Now, Ken, you mentioned that local atheists just really hates this ministry. They hate the Ark Encounter, and that's because the gospel is so clear and plain that you present there. But I noticed that next April, the American Atheists have announced their annual convention to take place right in Cincinnati. Is that just coincidental that it just so happens to be that the Ark is in the neighborhood?
No, it's not coincidental. I know that the American atheists were out here scouting around looking for places, and we got some feedback that they want to, do some things to oppose the Ark, to oppose Answers in Genesis, the Creation Museum, and they're running their conference in this area, their national conference of the American atheists. It's going to be downtown Cincinnati, actually, and it's going to be, during that Easter week and weekend. And so one of the things we decided to do, we have a big new $21 million Answers Center. It's a multi-purpose center, 2,500-seat auditorium with massive lobby and 36,000 square foot basement. By the way, why would we be building and opening a big new center like this if we weren't getting the people,
right,
weren't getting the support? And it's going to open next year, and so we decided we will run a conference called Answering Atheists the Easter week, from the Wednesday through to the Sunday, have a Sunday morning Easter sunrise service, and
wow,
we've got special guests coming in like Ray Comfort, from Living Waters, and Easy, his son-in-law, are coming in. We have other speakers coming in. It's going to be a major conference for that Easter week, with culminating in an Easter sunrise service that Ray Comfort preaches at. And we're going to offer the atheists a special way in which they can come to the Ark and try to outreach to them. But this is really going to be a conference for the whole family, for everyone, and it's going to be a unique sort of conference. So we decided to do that the same week the atheists are doing their conference, seeing as they're doing one. So we thought, well, let's do one too. And it'll be the first big major conference, really, at our brand new Answers Center.
Oh, tremendous. Folks, would you commit to be praying for Answers in Genesis? The attacks are coming on a regular basis against the Ark Encounter, the Creation Museum. I mean, they've even remodeled the Creation Museum to help the crowds go, quicker through the museum. And friends, be praying for Answers in Genesis ministry. Now, Ken, we're just 2 minutes from a break here, but you mentioned that you've got a great need for workers at Ark Encounter and the Answers in Genesis ministries.
We do, and one of the things is we just can't find enough staff, actually, because things are so busy, and we're always looking for seasonal people. There are high schoolers, college age, who do seasonal work, and we even have some facilities to accommodate in dormitories down at the Ark for seasonals. But if people go, they can go to either arkencounter.com, creationmuseum.org, and they'll have the jobs linked there. They'll see it pretty easily. But if they go to answersingenesis.org, our main website, go down the bottom where it says jobs and click on that. It shows jobs available at the museum, at the Ark, and at Answers in Genesis itself. And we are always looking for Christians in particular areas who will come and work at these facilities. And we're looking for staff to try to work with all the people that are coming, and we can't get enough staff. And yet the atheists, do you know how many people they employ in this area? None. Do you know how much of an impact they have on the local economy? None, except they're trying to undermine the impact of the Ark, which they're not successful at. You look at that and realize here we are impacting the community in a big way economically and employing all these people, and the local atheist group are trying to malign us. Absolutely amazing. But it's a spiritual battle, we realize that.
Ken Ham with us today from Answers in Genesis. You can check out those job openings at answersingenesis.org. Well, folks, we hear a lot about racism today. We'll be addressing it after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how old are the glaciers of Greenland?
Chris, the glaciers of Greenland are many thousands of feet thick, leading many to conclude that it would take long periods of time for the snow to build up. Well, here's something to think about. 2 American planes from World War II had to be abandoned on a Greenland glacier. Some 50 years later, a group went back to try and find and restore those now rare aircraft. It turned out they were buried beneath 250 feet of solid ice. Obviously, it doesn't take many thousands of years to build up that huge thickness. The expeditioners retrieved one of those planes and have now restored it, and it can be seen at air shows around the country. Chris, when we see this plane fly, we can enjoy the fact that this is just another evidence that the Back to Genesis truth of creation is accurate.
For more on creation, visit our website at www.icr.org.
Listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. With us today, Ken Ham, founder, CEO of Answers in Genesis, the Creation Museum, Ark Encounter. Folks, if you have not been there, you need to make the trip. You need to get there. And once you go, you just desire to go back. They're constantly doing things there and enhancing the facilities and adding more things. And Ken, we're going to get into this racism talk, but just a quick word. You've got just a spectacular events coming up here this Christmas time.
Oh, yeah, we get tens of thousands of people that come, and from November 23, we're doing it earlier this year, November 23, right through to December 30, except we close Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. We have incredible Garden of Lights at the Creation Museum, live nativity, people dressed as biblical characters, all sorts of different food things. It's spectacular. It's some of the best light displays you'll ever see in the whole of America. And then down at the Ark, we have brand new LED special programmable LED lights on the Ark for the rainbow lights on the Ark. We're taking back the rainbow, and we have special heated petting zoo and all sorts of other lights and foods and fair trade and all sorts of things. So people come from all over to come and see our spectacular Christmas displays and Christmas programs at the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum, and they can just go to arkencounter.com and it'll link you to both those. They can find out all about the Christmas program.
Great. Again, folks, that's arkencounter.com. Well, Ken, we hear a lot about racism today. I mean, we see laws passed in an attempt to stop racism. We have whole educational programs developed to try and deal with this issue, and despite all our attempts in society, you actually have said that only God has a solution. So let's talk about that solution. And are all these programs, are these curricula, are they just in vain? Let's talk about this issue of race.
Well, I personally believe the church should have been leading the way dealing with racism and prejudice. And one of the real reasons it hasn't is because so much of the church hasn't taught the true history in Genesis, or they've ignored the book of Genesis, or compromised with evolution of millions of years. And you see, as soon as you start with the Bible as the foundation for your worldview and start with Genesis 1 to 11, which is the foundation for the whole Bible and for your whole worldview, then you can start to deal with the issue of racism very easily. You start to develop the correct Christian worldview, and then we can use observational science, the science of genetics, to show that it actually confirms the biblical history. For instance, when people talk about the different races, now, wait a minute. The Bible makes it very clear we're all descendants of Adam and Eve, which means biologically there's only one race. So how can we talk about different races? And not only that, Darwin, I found most people, most teachers, for instance, most teachers in the public schools that teach Darwinian evolution have never read Darwin. They've never read The Origin of Species or never read The Descent of Man. The majority have never done that. If you read Darwin's book, The Descent of Man, it's an inherently racist philosophy. He teaches that there were lower races and higher races, primitive and advanced, that the Australian Aborigines were a lower race, closer to the apes than others, people with light skin, and people from Africa were closer to the apes. I mean, it's disgusting. But that's what he taught in The Descent of Man. And it's one of the reasons why I tell people, look, we've got to get away from using the word races. The word races has changed meaning. It used to mean, ethnic group, cultural group, the English race or the Irish race. But because of the influence of evolution, people tend to think of lower races, higher races, other distinguishing things. We're all one race. And when the Human Genome Project mapped the human genome in the year 2000, the headlines around the world were, we looked at genes and humans all over the world, and we found there's only one race. Of course, if we'd have stood on God's word, we would be saying that. And we've got to understand everyone, we're all equal before God. We all belong to the same family. We should love each other because we're all family, and we all go back to Adam and Eve. But it also means we're all sinners, and we all need the message of the gospel and the message of salvation. But it's interesting that when you start from the Bible, it's obvious there's one race of people biologically, and science has confirmed that. So there's the first teaching point I want to get across. Let's not use the term races anymore because of the influence of Darwinian evolution, because of all the connotations it brings up. Let's start talking about different people groups. And the reason we have different people groups, the Bible tells us that, the Tower of Babel. The event of the Tower of Babel, when God gave different languages, it split up the human gene pool, isolated groups from each other, and because of the genetic diversity God had put in the humankind, we end up with distinguishing features of each group, but they're only minor differences because of minor genetic variation, because we're all one race. And so let's start talking about people groups, not races. There's only one biological race. And there are many other things that we need to talk about, when it comes to skin color and things like that.
Do we know what tone of skin Adam and Eve were?
Well, here's what I would say. When you look at the genetic diversity within humans, and you look at the genetic diversity in regard to skin color, because everyone has the same basic color, it's a brown pigment called melanin, and there's a couple of forms of it, and there's some other pigments, but the main color we have is a brown pigment. It's melanin. And so there are no truly black people. There are no truly white people. I'm not a white person. I have light skin, light brown. So people would call me a white person, but that's not true because I've got melanin in my skin. You need melanin. And when someone says, oh, there's a black person, that's not true. They're not truly black. They're really dark brown. I'm light brown. They're dark brown. And you're everywhere in between. If Adam and Eve had maximum genetic diversity, it makes sense they were both middle brown. So, reasonably dark, but not real dark and not light. Middle brown. Like going to the paint store and saying, okay, show me your lightest brown color, show me your darkest brown. Okay, I want one in the middle. It makes sense. Adam and Eve were middle brown, maximum genetic diversity. So their kids could have been light brown through to very dark brown. And because of the Tower of Babel, some people end up with genes for only dark brown. Some people end up with genes for only light brown. And that's how you get different groups that only produce light brown people or only produce dark brown people. And I keep saying dark brown or light brown because we're all the same color. We're different shades, not different colors, but different shades. So we shouldn't say to someone, what color is their skin. It's what shade you are. And we shouldn't say, oh, there's a group of colored people and there's a group of non-colored people. No, everyone is a colored person. It just depends how much or how little of the color you have, unless you're an albino and don't have any, but that's a medical problem. So we're all the same skin color, different shades. We're all the same race. There are different people groups. We've got to get our terminology right in regard to these issues.
Yeah, and one of the things you point out in the book, and we're discussing One Blood for Kids, what the Bible says about race, that the Bible does not use the word race to describe different groups of people, but you point out, Ken, in this book that there are 7 spiritual races in the Bible. Just give us a glimpse as to what you present as spiritual races.
Well, Jim, at the museum, when people come to the Creation Museum, we walk through what we call the 7 C's of history. And, I put that together as a script, and it's been taught all around the world, actually. And our museum designers took the 7 C's of history and then designed the museum walkthrough that you experience when you come here. And I did a book on the 7 ages of dinosaurs based on the 7 C's of history, so the first age is, formed and fallen, and the flood age and so on. Well, I did the same dealing with the issue of race for this book, it's a book for children, but it's actually a book for mums and dads.
Yes.
It's a book for everyone, but it's beautifully illustrated. And so what I did was I said, based on the 7 C's, in other words, based on the Bible's history from creation, right through to the end, from Genesis to Revelation, I developed 7 races. There's the created race, and we're all members of the created race. We come from Adam and Eve. The fallen race, we're all members of the fallen race because sin entered the human race. The rescued race, the 8 people rescued on Noah's Ark, we're all descendants of them, so everyone is actually a member of the rescued race. The divided race, the Tower of Babel, divided up the human race into different people groups. The saved race, those who are saved by trusting Christ for salvation. Sadly, not everyone is in the saved race. Then there's the lost race, those who have rejected Christ and will be separated from God for eternity. We don't want people to be in the lost race, but sadly the majority are. And then there's the Lamb's race, those who will be at the marriage supper of the Lamb and will spend eternity with Christ. That's what we want everyone to be in. And so I go through these 7 spiritual races to teach the true history of the world in regard to the human race, and at the same time to teach against racism and prejudice, and you have children, mums and dads, everyone have the correct view of looking at the human race and deal with issues of skin color and all of those sorts of things, and help people to understand this topic correctly, all with a view of leading people to be members of the Lamb's race, the saved race, and so members of the Lamb's race. We don't want people to be in the lost race and be separated from God for eternity. And so it's an evangelistic book, but dealing with issues of race. We even cover topics about slavery. The Bible, talking about slavery, is very different to the slavery other people talk about in our modern world. And in fact, our VBS program, that we develop a VBS each year. It's in the top vacation Bible school programs in the world now, in top 3 in the world. And the one for next year is based on this book, because we believe it's so important.
Wow.
When you have, media using the word race and racism, people throwing around the word racist every day just about on the media, we need to get the truth to people and raise up generations who have the right foundation in regard to this issue, and understand that we're all family, everyone, every shade of skin, shape of ear, shape of eye, whatever ethnic group you belong to, we're all the same family, the human family, and we're all sinners, and we all need the message of salvation and to respond to the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Now, Ken, while you have written on this topic before in a book, especially for adults, this one you bring to a level that young children can understand, that teens can understand, adults will benefit from this book as well. But why did you present this in such a way to reach children?
Well, the issue of racism in our world is so rife. The church has not been dealing with it, I believe, and I know that you need to train children up right from an early age to have the right foundation. And, the Bible tells us to do that. And I wanted to produce a book that really took this to a level where kids can understand. Mums and dads will understand it. That's another reason we produce children's books, by the way, because I know mums and dads will understand them.
Yes.
I sort of say that tongue-in-cheek, but It's sort of true, too.
It is true.
And it's profusely illustrated as well. But we need to get children at a young age to give them the truth, and so that they don't grow up being influenced by the world. It's interesting. Today you see all sorts of books and things being banned from libraries and that because they claim they're racist or have racist overtones or some problems or whatever. What about Darwin's books? Darwin is inherently a racist philosophy, yet they will never talk about, banning Darwin's books. In the 1900s, one of the main biology textbooks used in the public schools in America actually taught that Caucasians were the highest race. I mean, how's that for racism and prejudice? No, we need to raise up generations standing on the right foundation. We're all that one human race.
Friends, be listening right after the break. We're going to be providing some special information how you can obtain one or multiple copies of this book by Ken Ham, One Blood for Kids, What the Bible Says About Race. It is a fantastic book that will really help you in instructing your children and others. We'll be right back.
We are concerned for our nation. The pathway on which we're headed is one destined for destruction. Collectively, our nation celebrates what God calls an abomination. Children are killed daily by abortion. Secularism is on the increase. The Bible and Christianity under attack. That which is evil is declared good, and that which is good is declared evil. In the book, The Coming Destruction of America, Pastor Neil Jackson undertakes a biblical examination of the judgments of God upon a land. You'll see what happens to a nation that rejects God's ways, rejects God's words, and rejects God's warning. It's a book that calls America to repentance to avoid the judgment of God upon our beloved land. This hardcover book, The Coming Destruction of America, is available for a donation of $17 or more to VCY. Obtain your copy by calling 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. We have just scratched the surface on this topic. The book has so much information in it, but we're going to tell you how you can obtain a copy of it. This One Blood for Kids, What the Bible Says About Race. It's a full-color, hardcover book, and we are just making a single copy available for donation of $17. That includes shipping. Or if you'd like 2 copies to the same address for a donation of $30. We would suggest you get one for yourself and one to give to another. Maybe your children could give it out to their friends as gifts. They go to a birthday party, or they coming up at Christmas time. Maybe you're a Sunday school teacher, to give to one to each member of your Sunday school class. Maybe you're a grandparent and you would like to get multiple copies for your grandchildren. Ken, this is a great book even for people to sit down and with their children or family devotions and just work through the information on it, on this issue of different people groups, but from a biblical perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a hardcover book.
Yes.
Beautifully illustrated, and it's over 60 pages. And, you know, one of the things that we do, for instance, if you know what a Pantone is, you know, when you go to the hardware store and you say, okay, what brown paint do you have? And you can fold out this Pantone and you can see all the different shades that they have. And so we use that in the book, for instance, to illustrate the shades of people and the fact that they're all the one color, and we use that throughout the book, actually, as we develop the concept of the 7 spiritual races. And it shows pictures from people all over the world and in past history, and it goes through genetics in a simple way so that kids and mums and dads can understand how people can inherit different skin shades. And, of course, it presents the gospel. We even show, a section of your skin to show how the pigment melanin is made in your skin, and it goes up to the surface of your skin to give you the shade that you are. We talk about some of the terrible racist things that happened to the Australian Aborigines, for instance, and when the Bible talks about slavery, it's not the slavery that people talk about today. That's important for people to understand, because the secularists, blast the Bible as a book that condones slavery. They're not using the word slavery in the same way at all. It's got nothing to do with what they're talking about. And so we need to right all those wrongs and teach the truth and teach them what the Bible says, and we teach them what science says. That's why it's a unique, powerful book that I'd love to see every family get them for their kids. But I tell mums and dads, you need to read it too. And grandparents, read it with your grandkids. Sit down and read it together. Give it to them for Christmas. We've got to deal with this race issue. It's a burden I have that goes back to 1975 when I was a teacher in the public schools in Australia, and I taught the kids there was only one race and talk about the Tower of Babel. And the Australian Aboriginal kids came to me and said, "Sir, please tell me more." And the reason they did, because they were treated terribly, because people who believed evolution believed that they were the missing links. And so there were people that came to Australia in the early days, sent over from Germany and England to hunt down Australian Aborigines to get specimens of their skulls and skin from museums in the name of evolution. And so the Lord really burdened me back then. I've always had such a deep interest in this topic, to get everyone to believe the correct way. And I am so burdened by some of the prejudice and racism I even see in our churches in America. So this is an important topic we've got to deal with.
Okay, folks, again, one copy available for donation of $17. That includes postage, or 2 copies to the same address for a donation of $30. It's available right now by going to vcyamerica.org, vcyamerica.org, or you may call our toll-free number at 800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829. Sometimes we look at the toy boxes for young people, and they're filled to overflowing. Folks, this is something that will impact them. They're giving them a biblical worldview. What does the Bible have to say about these? And, as Ken mentioned, it has an evangelistic witness in it. The way of salvation is in here, and what a tremendous resource to give grandparents, to your grandchildren, and for their parents to sit down with them and go through this book, but also certainly the impact that it can have upon young people, teens, older folk as well. Folks, I learn from this book itself, and you and your family will as well. So you can call our toll-free number at 800-729-9829, or quicker, go online at vcyamerica.org. You'll find it right there on the homepage where you can make a quick order of it today. By the way, folks, if you'd like to speak with our guest today on this topic of racism, skin color, the diversity in skin tones and so forth, and what's going on today, and these related issues, our number 800-733-9829. 800-733-9829. There's so many other helpful bits of information in this book as well. Ken, you actually brought up the topic of slavery, and this is often leveled against the Bible and Christianity. You said it's different than what we knew about here in our country. Could you explain a little bit further on that?
When the secularists are claiming, the Bible contains slavery and so on, this sort of thing, that is certainly not true, because the slavery they're talking about is people who were captured and forced to work under terrible conditions and so on. Slaves in the Bible, it's more like servants. They were more like paid servants. For instance, people who were going to go bankrupt, so to speak, could become a paid servant to, pay off their indebtedness. When there were people that were captured in war and so on, they could actually be servants, and they had rights, and they could earn their freedom. So Israelites could sell themselves as slaves to cover their debts, to make a wage, to have housing. But then there were rules. After 6 years, they had to be set free. See, when you actually read about all this, and we got all that detail in the book, and there's much more detail there, all of that helps people to understand this is not slavery like people think of slavery that, John Newton came out of and all the rest of it. This is very different, and it's really more like bond servants, and you need to put the word slavery in quotes in a sense, talking about that in the Bible. And so most people just aren't educated on that, haven't thought through those issues. So that's just one topic. There's many others. What about some churches I've actually heard teach that the curse of Ham in the Bible is that's where dark skin came from. Well, that's a load of nonsense. There's not even a curse of Ham in the Bible. It was Canaan. It was Noah's grandson that actually is talked about in regard to a curse because of his rebellion, but it's got nothing to do with the curse of Ham. There is no such thing. Nothing to do with skin color. That's just not true at all. I mean, we're all descendants of Adam and of Noah's family anyway, those 8 people. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of wrong teaching, a lot of misunderstanding, and we tried to deal with that. I tried to cover anything I could think of that related to this topic, to put it into this book so that people would truly understand this issue.
Young people could give this to their teachers for a Christmas present this year as well. Folks, you can request it when you call 800-729-9829 or vcyamerica.org. Let's go to Inglewood, Florida. We have Cy calling in. Hi, Cy. You're on the air.
Ken Ham, are you aware of certain Ark that was erected in China?
An Ark in China?
Well, I think you might be talking about Hong Kong. There was a building that was erected in Hong Kong that was said to, be like the Ark and the dimensions of the Ark. It's actually smaller than the Ark we have built here in Kentucky. It's only 450 feet long. Ours is 510 feet long. But it's made of concrete. It's a building. It's dwarfed by a freeway. And you would never get the idea of the sense of what the real Ark was like. And it's got a tiny little museum in it that has very little information about anything, and it's a hostel. So that's the only other Ark I know of that's been built is one in the Netherlands, which is built on barges, and it's nothing like the Ark we have. It's certainly built more, to the scale of the Ark, and built out of timber, but it's not like the Ark we have, which is built as a true timber frame structure and filled with 3 floors of exhibits. So the Ark here in northern Kentucky is certainly unique in the world.
Thank you, Cy, for the question. Richard is next in Grand Junction, Colorado. You're on the air, Richard.
Hello, guys. Great to talk with you, Ken. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, especially after your debate with the so-called science guy a couple years ago. Great job. Did you address the matter of eugenics in the book as far as the obvious, as you've already alluded to, racist qualities of evolutionary teaching?
We didn't address the issue of eugenics per se in that sense, using that term, but it is addressed in the sense that we do deal with Hitler and talking about the Aryan race, for instance, that he saw as the superior race and so on. So we deal with it in that perspective. So really the fruits of eugenics and the thinking of eugenics is covered in the book using particular examples, but not necessarily dealing with that as a specific topic, if you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and I think that's great, but it all points to the same mindset that
right.
Humanity is just a glorified animal. Thanks for
well,
your
we do
comments.
talk about the whole evolutionary aspect of evolution, of Darwinian evolution and survival of the fittest, and then people like Hitler who took evolution and applied it to be able to eliminate certain people groups and because they thought others were the superior race. So it deals with that topic in there.
Thank you, Richard. And boy, Ken, I came to mind is the name of Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and the very extreme views that she had in this area as well of eugenics and exterminating what she would call the black population, exterminating the people of dark skin.
Yeah, people don't realize how the founder of Planned Parenthood was so racist, and what she was really doing was really to eliminate those that she felt were unfit to survive, and selecting for those that she thought were the superior ones. I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting and evil, and so this book lays the right foundation to correctly understand how to deal with those topics.
We have Sally calling from Lannon, Wisconsin. You're on the air, Sally.
Yes, I have something on my heart about if we could, instead of sending ourselves, because my faith is pretty strong, to start sending people from the city in our places. You see what's happening with the elections in the cities and how we're really losing the inner cities. If we could just start some programs, I'd pay for the first family. I would love to start working with other churches and get some programs where we're shipping the inner city people there, and because I believe it's not so much meant for us believers, but
are you referring to the Ark, Sally?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what, there is great, and we'll address this, we're up against a break, but there is great benefit for you as a believer to go there as well. But I'm going to have Ken comment on that after the break. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewradio.com. Would you be shocked to find out that Russia, China, North Korea, South Korea, the United Kingdom, Israel, and Taiwan have all made preparations for an EMP attack? An EMP attack stands for an electromagnetic pulse. It is, when a nation like a rogue state like China, Russia, Iran, would put a nuclear device up into the atmosphere and detonate it, creating an EMP, or electromagnetic pulse. If they were to detonate one up over the U.S. off of a cargo ship or fishing vessel, it could put America in complete darkness. In fact, a congressional study finds that 90% of Americans would be dead within 1 year from disease, starvation, and civil unrest. Ironically, the nations that have EMP and that are protected are in Bible prophecy.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Ken Ham is with us from Answers in Genesis, Creation Museum, Ark Encounter, and friends, again, this book, One Blood for Kids, really is for both kids and adults, but we'd like to encourage you to consider getting a copy or multiple copies. Again, we're making one copy available for a donation of $17. That includes postage, 2 copies for a donation of $30. You can get it online at vcyamerica.org. vcyamerica.org, or by calling 800-729-9829. But what a tremendous gift to give to a teacher, a Sunday school teacher giving it to their young people in classes, grandparents for their grandchildren, moms and dads for their kids, a friend giving it to another for birthdays, etc. So many applications for this, but young and old alike will benefit from this book. Now, Ken, before the break, a person called and said, was hinting that the cities, the metropolitan areas are so liberal with people. If we could somehow ship them to the Ark and let them see this, the Ark is really good for both believers and non-believers. But let me have you go ahead and comment on that, caller.
Oh, yes, I love that lady saying that, because actually that sort of thing is happening. There are people who are bringing their non-Christian families, non-Christian friends, busloads of kids from inner city areas. There are groups that do that, and they bring them to the Ark and the Creation Museum. They come to the Ark and they walk through, and it witnesses to them in a way that nothing else can. And it's because it's such an iconic structure, the Ark, that kids just love it, people love it, and believers come. And I tell you, there's been such a lack of teaching in our churches on apologetics and knowing how to defend the Christian faith. When they go through the Ark and go through and see all the exhibits there and get all these answers, believers are set on fire for the Lord, and they're much more bold in their faith. We see people saved. In fact, 30% of people who come to the Ark are non-Christian. And so you can get people to the Ark you couldn't blow into church with a stick of dynamite. So I encourage people, look, a lot of people who won't go to church today will come and visit the Ark, so bring them.
David is next. Go ahead, David, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I work for an agency called Visiting Angels, and my boss just came back about 2 weeks ago when I was speaking to her on the phone. She came back from seeing the Ark. But and thank you, and I've ordered your tracts. They're excellent tracts because it starts with the beginning, and people need to know they're created in God's image. But the Malachi 2:14 is talking to, and 15 talking about the husband and wife, and the word says, "Wherefore one? Why did God, make him one flesh, that he might seek a godly seed?" And this is what it's all about. God just wanted, children made in his image, so he could pour out his love on them. And then, as Jim said before, in the Bible, the 750,000 words, we find the word nations, countries, kindreds, peoples, and tongues, but there's no word race. And then also...
I did tell you what, you've got a lot there, and we've got other callers lined up. Any comment there, Ken?
No, I totally agree. Malachi 2 is based upon history in Genesis, that you become one because you're one flesh. And why did you become one? What's the whole purpose of marriage? And it's its primary purpose. One of its primary purposes is to produce godly offspring. And we need to train up godly offspring. That's the reason why I encourage parents, by the way, to order the book from you, to give to their kids at Christmas. It's all part of raising up godly offspring.
Thank you, David. Let's go to another Dave in Milwaukee. You're on the air, Dave.
Yeah. As a quote-unquote white man, I do not feel, not hatred, but I feel no physical or sexual attraction towards black women, only white women. Does that make me a racist? I'm not being smart here. I'm just asking straight up, and I'll wait very
first of all, there are no black women and there are no white men, because we're all the same skin color. You're looking at the outside of someone, and the Bible reminds us that we shouldn't look on the outside. Remember when Samuel went to anoint the king, and he thought it was going to be one of David's brothers. He didn't know it was going to be David, and it says there, don't look at him, for the Lord has rejected him. For the Lord doesn't see as a man sees. A man looks on the outside, the Lord looks on the heart. And it's a reminder to us, it's the inside, not the outside, that we should be looking at. The inside in regard to our spiritual condition. And so when it comes down to marriage, it's not a matter of looking at the outside and someone's skin shade. It's a matter of, does that person love the Lord with all their heart and all their soul and all their mind? That's what matters. There's no such thing as interracial marriage biologically. We're all one race. It's the interracial marriage spiritually that the Bible speaks against. That's what should be our basis for considering in regard to marriage.
Thank you, Dave. We're going to squeeze one last call in. Keith from Wisconsin Rapids, you're on the air.
Yeah, good afternoon. I just wanted to know where Ken got the design of his ark.
Okay.
Were there ancient drawings and like that he used? I always had a hard time.
Okay, let me have him address that because we're down to 90 seconds. Ken, your response.
Okay, so real quickly, the Bible gives us the dimensions, but doesn't give us particular shape. And so what we did was research ancient wooden ships to see how they were built and to go back as far as we believe we could, and also to look at what makes sense from an engineering perspective, because obviously God would have had Noah build it so that it would survive the flood. And so we put a bow on it and build it the particular shape we did because that would survive catastrophic water. But it only gives the dimensions, just like with a car. You have dimensions, but you can design shape and so on the way that you want to. So it's based upon the Bible's dimensions.
Thank you, Keith, for your call. We're out of time here on the broadcast today. For more calls, I would encourage you to contact us to obtain the book, One Blood for Kids, What the Bible Says About Race, available at vcyamerica.org or by calling 800-729-9829. Ken, we thank you for being with us, and we want to remind folk you need born-again believers to come help and assist at Ark Encounter here for growing crowds that are happening there.
Absolutely, and they can go to answersingenesis.org to find out about positions available.
Great. God bless you, Ken. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
And folks, again, the book, One Blood for Kids, What the Bible Says About Race. By the way, they're going to be using this for their VBS curricula. Here's a great way to get a head start on it for this coming year, but what a tremendous tool to teach biblical truth to young people, and it's in such a way that it doesn't matter what your age, you're going to be learning from the book as well. Again, our number to contact our switchboard is 800-729-9829. It's critical, folks. There's not a day that goes by you're not hearing the topic of racism in the news or in the newspapers. Let's put biblical truth into that aspect, okay? Thanks so much for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.